Good afternoon, everyone. We are here today for the fourth session of the Zen Gardening series organized by the Dhamma Center called Chester. We have with us Alan Clements, founder and visionary of Cascades Gardens located in Derbyshire. And through the series, we have gone over different aspects of Zen gardening and also. Good afternoon, everyone. We are Apologies for that. We have gone over Zen gardening, its different aspects, Zen gardening all around the world. Alan has presented to us beautifully a very robust introduction into what this sort of gardening involves and the mental and the physical aspects of that. So today we have Alan with us again, and we will be doing introduction to bonsai, which people are excited about, including myself, and also a drone video of Cascade Garden. So over to you, Alan. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's Alan Clements from Cascades Gardens. Today I'm due to give you a talk, the fourth talk on the Zen gardening series. But this time it's going to be a little bit different in that what I want to show you today is two videos that I prepared in recent weeks about the garden. The first one is showing you all the glory of summer 2021, and we were lucky enough, a friend of mine brought his drone camera along, and we were able to get some fantastic shots sweeping into the garden from a high level. The second video is all about bonsai. It's my first bonsai video for you, and this explains a little bit about the history of bonsai in Japan and talks to you a bit about how to create your first bonsai. Well, before I start to play the video, the summer video of Cascades Gardens, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the principles of Japanese gardening, or at least as much as we can in a short space of time. The whole point of a Japanese garden is to revere nature, to imitate nature, and to create a garden as close to nature as is possible. Of course, they realize that it can't be perfect, and although they put an enormous amount of time into pruning and tending to trees and bushes and so on, they realize it can't be perfect, and there's some beauty in that. The whole idea is not to have straight lines, in fact nice curving, gentle slopes and curves around the garden, irregular pathways, no sense of symmetry as we do in British gardens. It's not meant to look the same on both sides. It's meant to be asymmetrical, and yet somehow there is always this feeling of balance and harmony. A lot of the plants and the features that they have in their gardens are symbolic in that they mean different things in the whole atmosphere of nature. One last thing perhaps it's worth mentioning, that often the gardens borrow the scenery of the natural world behind it, and so it means that the garden can look enormous and much bigger because it takes on the landscape behind it. Deep in the heart of Derbyshire, in the Matlock area, is a secret garden. Off the beaten track, it's 4 acres with a 100-foot cliff and a deep valley which used to be a limestone quarry. From the top of the cliff, you can look deep down into the valley. It's almost like a gorge going north-south, and it's very sheltered on both sides. Large beech trees on one side, the cliff on the other. In the center of the garden, there's a wide range of places to sit quietly in the different corners of the garden. Towering over the central garden is this beautiful golden Buddha. There are 15 benches around the grounds where you can sit and relax. Some areas are more Japanese than others. There's even a Karasansui rate gravel garden. The area around each of the seats has been landscaped separately and differently. Some parts are more Japanese than others, and there are lots of unusual plants for you to see. Cascades Gardens has its own plant nursery. It covers a range of hardy perennial flowers and shrubs, but now also it has a bonsai center. We brought in trees from Japan, 10 and 20 years old, and we've been creating our own trees. There's a small shop that allows you to buy pots and tools, and the whole nursery is geared up now to creating trees that are suitable for bonsai. You can approach Cascades Gardens from the nursery and gardens entrance. As you go into the car park, you find that there is an entrance hut and refreshments cabin. You approach the garden from a small gate close to the bridge. Here you can walk along the pond, full of reeds and Pseudochorus iris, and then walk around to the first seat in the middle of the pond. Here you can relax in the lush green with trickles of water. You might even catch sight of a duck or two. You can also see a statue of Andromeda chained to the rocks at the end of the pathway. Every year the pond gets a bit choked with reeds and iris, and the team and myself, we have to clear some of this. It takes a couple of days before we can get back to the clear water. As you leave the pond behind you, you then walk along the mill race. This mill race extends the whole length of the 2-acre edge of the garden, and from 1800 it used to drop water onto a big wheel on the end of our house, which was a corn mill. Looking back, you can see one of the polytunnels and seat 9, which is completely surrounded by wonderful plants, trees and shrubs. Some of them are quite rare. From the mill race you can look down a staircase which actually acts as an overflow in heavy rain. When the mill race gets under pressure, these steps become a waterfall and take the excess water down to the stream below. This seat looks back through the copse, ancient beeches, must be at least 150 years old, and the mill race, which we've had to raise the height of because of heavy flooding in recent years. You climb down about 15 steps by the ruins of the old corn mill. It brings you to a lovely shrubbery and our front drive. In front of the house, at the front part of the ruined corn mill, is a waterfall. Here in this shot it's rather dry. And in the wetter months it looks like this. And the history of the house is on the wall there, and we move round into the car park, the driveway, and we start to see the beginnings of the garden high up in the cliffs above. On the left we have a fully grown oak-leafed hydrangea and Persicaria firetail with its spikes of red flowers. Cascading over the old ruin are 2 waterfalls, both about 15 foot high. 6 months of the year they're heavily full of water. At this time it's a little bit dry in July. Lots of moss, and sometimes after a heavy rain or storm, thunderstorm, it can get really heavy flow. From the car park you go through a rose arch And that takes you to our second seat, which is on the edge of the Japanese garden. Sitting in seat 2, you have the magnificent view of the cliff and the whole part of the central garden. But what dominates is this wonderful Indian Buddha, golden Buddha, in the background. In front of the Buddha is the Japanese pot garden with azaleas and cryptomerias. Also a Catalpa bignanoides. The golden Buddha was donated to us this year by the Aldershot Buddhist Centre. It had originated from the Indian High Commission in London. It's 8 foot tall and 8 foot wide and has a wonderful peaceful expression on its face. Perfect for meditation. To one side of the Japanese garden is a quiet corner with a Karen Sansui garden, that is to say, Japanese raked gravel and rock garden, very similar to some of the monastery gardens that I saw in Kyoto in 1996. We have a special rake we've made so that we can rake the gravel carefully in circles and lines to concentrate the mind. The whole idea of this sort of Karasansui garden is that it's meant to represent an ocean with islands, or perhaps if you've ever climbed a mountain and gone through the cloud level at 10,000 feet, you'd recognize the peaks of mountains poking through a layer of cloud. Beyond the Golden Buddha is a quiet seating area in the shade garden. Shade garden is surrounded by hostas, hellebores earlier in the year, and under the beech trees. There's a statue of Pan just in front of the seat, and it's a peaceful statue in all this lush greenery. Moving away from the Buddha, we move towards the conifer garden. Conifer garden was created in November 2015 at the same time as my little daughter was born. The conifers, of course, have been growing quite rapidly in the last 6 or 7 years, and we're starting to have to thin them out a bit. The statue of Bacchus, the Greek god of wine, presides over this garden, and as you move towards the rocks, you pass more and more conifers and head towards a beautiful rose arbor where you can sit and relax and smell the perfume. All the benches in the garden are this Lucian style, and in this case it's quite a contrast to the old shed that we've had for many years tucked behind it. This used to be Lord Methuen, the predecessor's gin and tonic seat. Guess what it is now? It's my gin and tonic seat. Through the conifer border, there are some steep steps climbing the cliff. Lots of handrails, nice and strong to haul you up, but do be careful. Looking down on the old quarry, the old limestone quarry, there's a dramatic view. And slowly as you climb the steps, you go through the woodland and have spectacular views down onto the garden. From the seats on the top of Fern Bank, you can clearly see the central part of the garden and the different meditation seats placed around the garden in quiet, secluded corners. Back down from your climb from Fern Bank, you pass the hut and go into another Japanese area with bamboos and statues and raked gravel. You can see here the monk meditating quietly by the rocks and a sleeping Buddha. Moving on, you go into seat number 5 area, which is perhaps my favorite. We've managed to arrange that water is dripping down the cliff into 3 pools. Little Buddhas sitting between the rocks, quietly reminding you of how you can achieve peace of mind by sitting quietly by the pools and hearing the dripping water, being enclosed amongst the rocks. From seat 5, you reconnect with the main path going down the garden. On the right-hand side, you have all the roses, which are so colourful in June. On the left-hand side of the perennial beds is a path following the flow of the stream, which comes all the way down the garden. Some of the interesting flowers are the veronicastrum, tall spikes slightly bending over in the wind. We have a lot of malva, 6 foot high, beautiful pink flowers. And we have Actaea simplex, a dark-leafed maroon plant with a spiky white flower. At seat 7, it's a wonderful tranquil spot, sitting in front of the tufa arch and the steps coming down from the mill race, and this gentle cascade with the sound of water. The miscanthus grass covers the view a little bit and makes it that much more interesting. Tufa stone is a volcanic rock. It's quite light, it's almost like coral, and it can be found across the cliff, the other side of the valley, in Matlock Bath. Traditionally, I'm told that creating these arches, which seem to defy gravity in rather strange shapes, was part of a Derbyshire custom. Continuing along the stream, there's a whole range of marginal planting. Nice moist area, slightly shaded by the huge giant yews. Along the stream we have all sorts of water plants, pseudochorus, different types of water grass, rheum and hosta. A little path winds up from the tufa arch towards seat 10. There are some interesting trees in this area. The Chinese lime and Liriodendron Chapel Hill. Very vivid on one side of the path is the berberis, lovely yellow flowers and rich ruby leaves. At the top of this path, on the left-hand side, a little path takes you to a beautiful Greek statue. At seat 10, which we call Paradise because of the beautiful range of flowers which you can see, you're sitting under the Circiphyllum tree, which goes beautifully pink in the autumn. Opposite you is a hellebore bank, which in March is a blaze of colour, a whole different range of Helleborus orientalis. There are a number of very attractive hydrangea here in this border. In the triangular border there are a number of shrubs, including a poplar tree and Catalpa bignanoides in its yellow form. Looking down towards the nursery end with the polytunnels, you can see seat 8 and seat 9. In the spring, seat 9 has a wonderful array of rhododendrons in pots. In the small polytunnel, we have a whole range of cuttings that I've taken over the last 5 years of all the different conifers that we have in the grounds. The cascades tumbles over the wall from the mill pond into the area of seat 9, through the tufa arch, and passes by the nursery beds. A wider range of marginal flowers here, lots of colour, Pseudochorus iris, Persicaria of finis, variegated irises. And all the way along the right-hand side of the stream is petisite. This is an almost wild plant that loves being by having its feet in water and can be found beside all the rivers in Derbyshire and grows wild. In the early spring, the pedicite shoots up white spikes of flower before the leaves begin, and then gradually the leaves take over during the summer, a little bit like a rhubarb plant, and envelops the flowers. There are lots of Letharum and Astilbe in different colours, pinks and red, but also Hemerocallis, bright orange colours, and a variegated hosta, bright yellow. Looking back down the path are two ancient yew trees. Placed in a pair, they are at least 150 years old, and the bark is really attractive and smooth. A second tufa arch, one that I've created from surplus tufa rock that we found around the garden, takes you to the arch of the nursery. Through the arch into the nursery area, the first polytunnel is all about bonsai. I have a range of trees that are being prepared for bonsai, and some imported Japanese trees which are perhaps 10 or 20 years old. The main polytunnel is full of hardy perennial flowers. It doesn't take you long in the nursery before you stumble across the lead mine. This is perhaps dating back to 1800. It goes 150 feet inside the cliff. It's quite safe now. We've cleared the floor, and the light switch is on the left as you go in. There's a spotlight every 5 meters. There is a log cabin that forms the refreshment area, and here you can have a cup of tea, coffee, cold drinks, and a selection of delicious homemade cakes. We call ourselves the meditation garden because we have 15 benches scattered around the site, some on the cliff, on the hillside, in quiet corners, and the seats are numbered. So when you're greeted at the garden, you'll get a guide which takes you round seat by seat, and if you follow the seats, you'll get to all the best bits. Well, we hope we can welcome you to Cascades Gardens sometime in the future, hopefully soon. In the garden, we have a bonsai centre. This is a new thing that we've just started in the last year. And what we're trying to do is appeal to those who don't know much about bonsai but would like to start. And we sell trees that come from Japan, but they're not too expensive. So here's a few words about what bonsai is all about, its philosophy, and how you might start your first tree. Well, the word bonsai comes from pensai, which is a Japanese word simply meaning tree and pot, the art of putting a tree in a pot. So, straightforward. And it came across from China in the 12th century, brought over by Zen Buddhist monks. They were also involved in converting from Chan Buddhism in China to bring it to Japan, Zen Buddhism. And it was a peaceful pastime. It was a spiritual horticultural experience where people could create miniaturized landscapes in a tray and then put them on their verandas or the Japanese equivalent and peacefully gaze on nature. The practice of bonsai is a horticultural technique mixed with spirituality and art. And the whole objective is to reproduce the best form of nature, to revere nature and to celebrate nature, but to create the best possible specimens of trees that represent nature. Zen Buddhists would take up this practice, and to do so and to have the best success in horticulture of these trees, they had to have 3 elements of their philosophy: truth, goodness, and beauty. And to produce the best possible tree, there was a deep spiritual aspect to it. Well, derived from Buddhist teachings, there was the concept of wabi-sabi, and this involved transience and imperfection. That is to say, when you developed and grew your bonsai tree, you would go through the seasons and experience the different aspects of the plant in winter and so on, and spring and summer, and you'd watch the seasons go by. The other thing is that they also followed this concept of imperfection, that nothing is perfect, and often on bonsai trees you see there are bits of dead wood on the plant, and this is special and part of the philosophy. The Japanese believe that there are special therapeutic benefits from doing bonsai, in that it gives you a sense of concentration and peace and tranquility, working with nature, being one with nature. So bonsai is an art form that is meditative, reflective and harmonious, and can give you peace of mind. Well, what can you make bonsai from? People often think that bonsai is something for inside the house. But in fact, most bonsai trees are external trees, and they enjoy being outside in the weather, in the sunshine, and that's the way they thrive. They don't thrive in conservatory conditions. They mustn't dry out, for example. So you can make a bonsai out of an oak tree. Here you can see something I've started to shape, because one of the things about bonsai is that very often the Japanese like to have this idea of flow. The trunk flows in a nice, interesting shape. So that's an oak. Here's an hornbeam. You can see there's a nice shape there to the trunk of the tree. And it's developed quite a nice ramification where there are lots of leaves and little branches. My favorite sort of bonsai tree, trees that will flower and fruit during the season. So here's a little crabapple. Can you see the crab apples there? It's going to produce some nice bright yellow fruits. And of course, previously in the year, there was an attractive white blossom. But some bonsais are frost tender. So for example, this ficus here is an indoor tree. You can see how attractive it is. It's also got that shape to it, but these aerial roots into the compost there. Very beautiful tree, but that's frost tender. That's one of the very few trees that are frost tender, that perhaps in the winter you need to have it inside your conservatory or something like that. One of the first things you have to think about with a bonsai is to get it out of the pot and to look at the root. The root here, as you can see, is very healthy, and it's going to be a very healthy tree. This is a yew tree. And the way to deal with this is to simply pull away some of the earth around these roots, like that. And then let's try to find how far the trunk goes down. And as you go down, taking away the earth, you can see that actually you've got quite a nice little trunk down there with roots coming forwards. So here you can see, by pulling the earth away in that long deep pot, we've actually found a lot more trunk. And can you see close up here, we have quite an attractive, what is known as nabari, which is the base of the trunk. And there, when I think we wash that a little bit, we can see there's some nice large roots there that can be featured. So we use a root tool here that just gently rakes out the earth like that, and slowly we're getting out some of all that root, and we don't need all of that. When we're bonsaiing, we can then trim the root like this, like that. And we get rid of that. And can you see there now you've got the beginnings of something, a restricted root, but quite a nice shape. And to make sure that we can fit it in the pot, we have to get rid of that bottom root there, so it will sit neatly in a pot. And this pot here is the sort of thing that we could use. Can you see it sitting flatly there, but with the big roots showing nicely? So when you put a bonsai in a pot, the first thing you have to realize is that you have some very big drain holes in the pot, and so that's great because it means that the water will drain straight through the gritty compost very quickly and not waterlog the plant. But we then have to fill these holes so that it would hold the grit in. And basically, here's one I prepared earlier. It's a tiny one. What we're going to try and do is fill the holes up with a little piece of gauze and attach it with wires like that. And also we're going to have a piece of wire to tie the tree in so that the tree won't fall out. So the first thing is we cut a suitable piece of gauze like that, maybe another square. So we've got 2 squares over the 2 holes. And you need a couple of bits of wire like that, and then we'll form a U shape and then push it in this way through the gauze and into the hole of the pot. Can you see that way here? Into the pot, push it down and then turn the pot and then secure the wires this way to hold the piece of gauze in. And you see there we've managed to do that. Same thing again over here, create a U through the gauze, there we go. To tie the tree in, we're going to get a piece of wire like this and thread it through the bottom of the pot into the gauze so that it sits in this way like that. So we've pulled that up, pulled this one up here, and we've got some piece of wire here that will tie in the tree. We have to look at the base of the tree and decide which is the front of the tree. Is it this side here? No, I think probably it's that way here with the front. And then we put it into the pot carefully with the front showing, and then we tie it in with this piece of wire. And you see this is starting to tie this in here. And we take it like that. And then to tie the tree in, we have those 2 wires, look, and then we start just to hand twist there, and then we've got these pliers which will then do the job properly and twist that root and the wire in. There we go, and push those down. So we've now got our tree fixed into the pot. So to put the compost into the plant, the first thing is to find some grit, a bit like that, and we might use 50-50 grit and compost mix to put around the tree. There are lots of other specialist composts and soils that you can use. I can talk about that another time. And then creating a 50-50 mix like this, and just sort of mix it together. And this will give you plenty of free drainage and also hold the tree down, give it a lot of good root growth. Well, there are two principles to think about now. Is that one is we want to have a good shape for the tree, and then in principle it wants to be something like a cone, like this, shaped like that, with the top cropped. And the other thing is we want to wire the tree so that we get straight branches coming this way and this way, so as to give it some shape. First thing I want to do is, looking from the front, is to reduce the amount of branches coming into my face, as it were, and try to find a bit of shape here. So we're trimming these branches down quite strongly so that we have the widest, potentially, although that's going to have to grow on a bit, branches at the base. We don't want that one, or that one, and we'll try to start to create a shape. So the first thing we might do is take a piece of wire that is the length of 2 branches. So it's always a good idea to have a piece of wire that goes round the tree like that to anchor the wires. This is a 2mm wire, and then to wrap that around these small branches like this. And this will train those bottom branches to grow a bit more and to get wider and more ramification. And another one here. Can you see how there you've suddenly got control of the shape of these branches and the way that they're bending? Can you see like that? So then a last branch towards the end, towards the top of the tree, where we can bend the wire around the branch. Something like that. And now you can see the wiring taking shape. And we've just got to finish the top of that, because what we've got to stop is all that new growth coming out of the top there. So we might then take this one back to about here, and these smaller ones here and here. And can you see then we've got the beginning of a conical shape. I'll get rid of that, get rid of that. And the beginnings of our bonsai. We don't need this piece at the bottom, or a little piece here. And we don't need all this around here. And there you can see we've got the beginnings of a bonsai tree. So this is a Japanese hornbeam that needs a little bit of a haircut, and I'm going to start to just show you the principles of that, but not necessarily do the whole job. So as you can see, when you look at a leaf here, the whole idea is not to have a single shoot, but actually to try to encourage it, cut off the tip, like something like that. And then what you've done is given the opportunity for new shoots to come out sideways, so that instead of one single shoot, you've got 2. So I'm taking that off, and then hopefully a new shoot will come here and a new shoot will come there. So we're doubling the number of shoots, and then you do the same thing again, and you double again, and you double again, and that's called developing ramification. And you can see that this whole tree needs a little bit of a trim in that way to trim off some of these longer shoots that have come through the summer to keep that tightness of formation. Like that. So here you can see that we're starting to develop quite a nice shape for the tree. Like that. And here you can see a Chinese elm that I've been trimming quite hard to get it back into shape. And can you see now the new growth developing here and here and here? And that will start to develop that ramification, so it becomes quite a nice dense tree. So when you've got the beginnings of your bonsai tree, what do you do about feeding and watering it? Well, basically there's bonsai tree feed that you could buy in any bonsai center. We supply it in small packets. You only need to feed once a year, maybe twice a year. It's the same with pruning. Best to prune in the spring, and then at the end of the year, you don't have to keep pruning it, It's particularly after that initial summer growth, and water whenever you need to. Make sure it never dries out. Just keep it damp. If you're lucky enough to have moss around your garden, or even you can go walking and just find some wet dry stone walls, then you could put moss on the top of your plant. So here's one that we've done before. So if we take back our little tree that we've started, what we can do, we're lucky we have lots of walls around with nice thick moss, and we can fit it onto the top of the pot, push it in like that, and you could have it like that, water it well. Give it a good soaking, let it water the tree at the same time, and because it's a gritty compost, the water will just drain straight through, push the moss in well, and that will start to root and grow. Well, that's all for today. Hope to see you at the Bonsai Centre soon.
Thank you, Alan, for that wonderful presentation. Alan did tell me that there was a lot of work involved in putting together that video clip, and now I understand the amount of work which might have gone to that video. Thank you so much, Alan. That was such a nice video to watch and sort of go through. It made me, I must be honest, it made me calm just watching you do all that planting. Thank you. So, if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask Alan, this is your time. Alan, would you have any remarks or sort of, before we go into the question and answer, would you have anything to sort of say or add?
I just wanted to stress with bonsai, although we see these wonderful 500-year-old trees, which cost millions, when you're just starting off, it's fun to just mess around with young trees and grow things from seed. Play around with young shoots, and don't worry too much about it. It's quite a nice, fun thing to do. It doesn't have to be stressful. You don't have to have 50 years experience. So that's our message, really. We're deliberately growing young trees, which you can start playing around with. It's quite fun using that wire and creating different shapes. That's why we call it art.
Yes, yes. So would anyone have any questions that they would like to ask? Alan, with mentioning of these different bonsais, and bonsais can be quite expensive to purchase as well. What sort of inherently gives it that value, that sort of resell sort of value when you sort of go into valuing a bonsai? Yeah. And how do you, yes, that.
Okay, well, I mean, obviously bonsai increases in value over the years that it's looked after. And if you're meticulously looking after something and keeping it fresh and applying the right horticultural principles, then it's had a lot of care. Mm-hmm. So we have 10 and 20-year-old Japanese trees, and you can see how much the little branches have become more complicated or ramified, as we talked about that. And so you're paying for someone's attention and the years that have gone by. It's good to have a very thick trunk. The more interesting the trunk is, the more character it has. The older it looks, and that helps with value. I think the point is that just by playing with these trees, developing these trees, creating as natural shapes as you can, it's what you feel about it, and it's that sort of peaceful activity that has the value to me. It's not whether the tree is worth £600 or something.
Of course, of course, of course. What are things that people should be looking for if they're sort of going for a bonsai? Is there a specific plant that you would recommend starting off for a beginner who knows nothing about sort of, who just has the interest in sort of, cultivating this sort of this area?
Yes. Well, I mentioned Chinese elm a number of times there. They're really quite easy to start with. They're pretty forgiving. You can cut bits off and which you shouldn't have done, and they'll soon grow back within a year or so. So Chinese elm, pines are an attractive and nice thing to work on because you're dealing with the pine needles and reducing them. Has a nice shape, and quite common is that ficus frost tender tree, which also can sort of be half in the conservatory, half out, which people really enjoy, and that's a very forgiving thing to prune.
Mm. I think some of us might need a lot of forgiveness from trees, just as we're starting off. Alan, you seem to have a lot of experience in the area. Okay, so
Yeah, but forgive me.
yes.
One thing that you do have to do is you have to be pretty ruthless with the trimming to start with to get the shape, the initial shape. You can take quite a big shrub or tree. I'm talking 2 or 3 feet high. You have to be quite aggressive with the amount you prune off to get that first shape. After that, it becomes a little bit more straightforward.
Mm. Mm. Okay. So, yes, Nira.
I'd like to find out if you're
Nira, we are having trouble hearing you. Nira.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, very vague, but okay, Nira, go ahead.
Okay. If you're developing one outdoors, you showed some of the plant pots. Are they for indoors, and can you use those? Are they too small for outdoors, or what do you recommend?
Did you hear the question, Alan?
I'm afraid not. No, something to do with pots.
So I will repeat the question. I was listening attentively. Anira's question is the pots that you displayed. Are those for more outside or inside, or are they sort of flexible to be used? Am I right, Nira?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, a bonsai pot is usually quite shallow, depending on the size of the tree, compared to the traditional pot that you might have a 2-foot deep pot for a large shrub or something on the terrace, but with a bonsai tree with a reduced root, you would probably only have 2 or 3 inch deep pots, much less if it was a small tree. You have to have those quite large holes for drainage and all that sort of thing. But you can use the same pots indoors or outdoors for bonsai. It's a bonsai pot. You can have some beautiful clay pots, some with Chinese and Japanese inscriptions, and some very beautifully produced ceramic pots. It's worth looking around for those in a bonsai center.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nira. Would there be anyone who actually has some bonsais at home, as I wonder, who actually does a bit of bonsai? There seems to be no one. Well, maybe you could start and let us know how it goes. Or maybe we can take a field trip to Alan's bonsai garden one day. So, Alan, what about plant food and fertilizer and that sort of thing?
Yes, well, there are different soils that you can buy, specialist soils that are created. You can bring them in from Japan, or you can have them here. You can mix your own. And the other thing is that there are it is better to have a dedicated bonsai tree food if you can find it. Although in principle, I suppose that any good fertilizer that you would put on a shrub or a tree in the garden would apply.
Mm. Yeah, wonderful.
What we're going to try and do is on our retreats now, which are going quite frequently. We're having retreats. We are having an hour session towards the end of the meditation retreats that we're having, where we're actually helping people to train and take away a tree.
Oh, that's very nice. More incentive to come for a retreat. Absolutely wonderful. So are there any questions that anyone would have with regards to what we discussed today? All right. So Alan, what are we going to speak about next week? I mean, next month?
Yes, well, this is one that I've had in the wings for a long time, and I've been doing quite a lot of work on it in the last month. It's going to be what I think of as, if you like, it's a little bit of everything that you've seen before, but with the conclusions that I've reached from Zen gardening. So it's about meditation, it's about using those techniques, mindfulness, and so on. But it's also bringing in some of my more Buddhist background, where we're going to consider the whole issues of emptiness and trying to lose ego and that persistent self that gives us so much trouble. It's going to be my spiritual journey in 50 minutes. So quite a challenge.
Yeah, something that I've actually noticed with your presentation today, and of course the drone pictures and all the pictures that you've sort of displayed, and also from the Japanese Zen gardens all around the world, you know, within the Japanese culture, the rich idea of slowing down, even when it comes to Japanese tea ceremonies, the laying of incense, and you know, the idea of really slowing down, where in Buddhism we have the teachings of the present moment, arriving into the present, enjoying the process, being with what is done. And that has, I think, through these 5 weeks, or rather 4 weeks up until today, I think that has been really conveyed. And when we sort of look at all that work, Alan, that you have put in, for me, I feel like, oh my gosh, I wouldn't have been able to do this. All that patience and dedication into sort of really finding the perfect laying of the plants all over your garden, and sort of really bringing it to life in the way that you have. It is something very, very special, I believe.
Well, thank you for that. And when I did my first or my final tour of Japan in 1996 and did a study of Japanese gardens there, what struck me most wasn't particularly what was in the garden, but the fact that most of the smaller monastery gardens had meditation platforms on the side. And when you sat there and you looked over the garden, you had some rather wonderful feelings. They were certainly peaceful and relaxing, but also something a bit spiritual, and something where you were connecting with nature, or as the monks would say, be one with nature. And it's that feeling that has always struck me and impressed me. And if you like, in simple terms, I've been trying to bottle that and bring it to Cascades and apply it to the garden here. There are a lot of people now who are telling me I've started to achieve that, and they're most grateful that they have the opportunity to sit and relax on a sunny day in some of the meditation seats. So I hope we'll bring that out, particularly in the last talk.
What a luxury it might be to have a Zen garden right at your doorstep, Alan. I mean, you can have all the money in the world, but you know, this is a particularly special luxury that you're enjoying. So with that, maybe if we do not have any questions that you would like to ask Alan, we could bring the session to a close, and then look forward to Alan's presentation next month, the first Saturday of the month in November. So that falls on the 6th of November. So thank you very much, Alan. Thank you for taking the time to to bring together that video clip that you sort of immersed us in that experience of sort of really making us feel actually as if we are standing right there with you doing that bonsai. Thank you very much. That was a very, very special experience, particularly for me. And I hope the others feel the same way. So thank you for all your hard work and dedication towards this series. And we're looking forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks very much. Nice to see you.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Take care, everyone.